Joined now by the outstanding Mark Wogenrich, SI.com. Mark, welcome back. Great to have you with us again.
Always appreciate it, Steve. Thanks.
Never a dull moment. So,
you and me both.
Yeah, never a dull moment. All right. So everyone saw what happened with Ohio State, and you've been in all the press conferences, both home and away. And the comments that have been made, with the comments that have been previously made, especially after the Ohio State game, were you then in any way, shape, or form surprised by the move Sunday, or did you think it would come later?
By the move Sunday, yes. Initially, James Franklin's explanation about it Monday made complete sense. It's just, I put it in a historical context with him that he's never been that coach to make the move in season.
That's right.
And yeah, so that's I guess where my head was at. I just simply wasn't expecting it to be Sunday. Right. It completely makes sense because I think James ascribes to that management style that says don't rush a decision, but then don't delay the action when you've made the decision, if that makes sense. That's pretty much what he said. You know, once he decided to make that was what he was going to do, he had to do it. And that gets him in the market that much sooner. It also gets his team, I think it gets his team actionable in the situation now where they can hit a refresh last couple of games, get some new ideas, think critically, about where they were, and make that transition. Maybe reinvigorate people to make that transition. So ultimately, especially after hearing James talk about it yesterday, it was no surprise at all then.
Let's take Ohio State and Michigan. What was your evaluation of what you were seeing with the Penn State offense against Ohio State and Michigan?
Well, going back to Saturday, I think you've talked about it. I thought they ran fairly well.
Yes, they did.
Against Michigan. I mean, I looked at some of the numbers. Like first down, they averaged 6.5 yards a carry on first down. So that was the kind of football that they want to play. That was scheduled football, right? But second down was not good. It was, Ohio State's third down was their detrimental down, obviously, 1 for 16. It felt like more second down was the issue, an issue against Michigan, because if you average 6.5 rushing, their average third down distance, said the stats up, was 5.5. So they were gaining a yard, essentially, on average on second down. They weren't then continuing what they were doing. And I think it also felt like against Michigan, they weren't giving the Drew Aller at least an opportunity to go in rhythm, to gain a rhythm. And James Franklin had said that. He said that after the game, and we kind of expanded upon that Saturday. And you can run by throwing, so they could have given him some run type throws instead of actually just running into those looks. And I think by the third or fourth quarter against Michigan, at that point you're asking Drew to kind of assume all the responsibility, and it just didn't look like he had been positioned to do that, or at least he wasn't put in a position to do that. He accepted the blame. Drew accepted the blame. He's going to do that. Players are going to do that. But you can't expect him to go through this game of this insistence on first down that they were going to run against a look and not give him at least some opportunities to throw, or at least to set him up for the third, fourth quarter when he's going to have to be in position to do it.
And I'll just at least back that up with the statistical part of it. Penn State had 22 first down plays, and Mark's exactly right. I felt the same way. They ran the ball very well on Saturday, but 19 of the 22 calls on first down were runs.
Yeah, I think he only completed one of his passes on first down.
One of three.
Two, so.
Yeah, one of three. Yeah. Okay. So now how interested are you with this Saturday? I mean, it's the same personnel. I got that. But as to what it might look like on Saturday, how interested are you by this?
Very much. I'm interested in how the running backs coach and the tight ends coach handle the quarterback, if that makes sense. Because I think they need to be in a position, again, I think they need to be in a position to make Drew Aller comfortable, or to give him at least tools in plays that will make him comfortable. There probably should be more of a mix. Rutgers is not a slouch defensively at all.
That's right.
But Penn State's going to have opportunities because they're going to have offensive possession opportunities because Rutgers is not really, they're not in any, an offensively really challenging offense right now. They're struggling to throw the ball. They, came up scoreless against Iowa. So I think Penn State's defense is going to give that offensive position to produce in this game. But the defense, Rutgers' defense is going to test them quite a bit. So I think Jaywan Sider and Ty Howell have to be able to, at this point, give Drew some confidence, even a confidence in the sense of having him throw the ball. I remember after the Maryland game, Drew talked about feeling kind of this renewed confidence, something that he had in high school when he was in an offense that threw 50 times a game, and he seemed to have felt that at Maryland, and that's a function of the kind of defense they're playing. All those sorts of things. But to me, I think their biggest step is to kind of reinvigorate the confidence in Drew and then in the passing game on top of that.
Big picture now. I mean, there's still more games to be played in this season, but they've already now played Ohio State and Michigan. It didn't go well for Penn State in either one. So are they any closer? Are they the same or further behind, in your opinion, after watching how it played out this year?
Yeah, well, if you subscribe to the argument that if you're standing still, you're falling behind, then they fell behind. Now, these were not blowout games like some of them have been in the past, and I go back to that Ohio State game, and if Curtis Jacobs' touchdown stands, if there's not a penalty between one of the best defensive players in the country against maybe the best offensive player in the country. We could be talking about a completely different situation here. I think that's how close some of the margins are. But when you're kind of in that margin of being very close, it can feel wider than maybe it truly is. It's like, Penn State is at 35,000 feet as a cruising altitude, but those two teams are at 38,000 feet. And, this is probably not a great analogy because the altitude gets thinner up there, so it's easier to climb. But there's always that belief, there's always that idea that just getting to the top level, the elite level, is harder than getting through the incremental levels below that. So I think they're probably as close as they have been. It's just that, again, if you're static, then it feels like you're falling further behind them.
Yeah. Okay, so the team now in this particular week, it's going to be interesting to see how they react to all this. But what's interesting is that people are forgetting it is senior day. It never really has come up. Yeah. Right? I always find that what's interesting about senior day is just because somebody runs through the tunnel doesn't mean they're coming back, but I'm always interested in who actually runs through it. What about you?
Absolutely, and especially now, I believe this the last year of the COVID extra year of eligibility?
I think next year. If you combine redshirting with COVID, I think it's next year.
Right, that's what I was thinking. Is either this year or next year. Bible, I think you're probably right. That probably goes next year. So, absolutely, that takes a little bit of it off because that's a decision. Sean Clifford made his decision too. Yeah. That was probably at least the end of the season, after the season. But yeah, there are players. That always intrigues me of who decides that this is going to be their last go around. from many perspectives, and it's interesting to me that this is not this result, being 8-2 now, potentially 10-2, is not the result that players like Olu Fashanu and Theo Johnson and East Isaac and Curtis Jacobs came back for.
Right.
They will tell you that. They will tell you that flat out. That we didn't come back to go 10-2, but they also didn't come back to go 8-4 after losing like the two games that they probably on their schedule that they wanted most.
Right.
So I mean, I get a sense. I was there in the post game with Theo Johnson, and to see the level that he cares,
yes,
about the past, present, and future of this team. There's still a core of guys that they're going to try their level best to make sure that this team does not go 8-4, 9-3, whatever you want to say. He's bought in. Like a guy like Theo Johnson is he's just completely bought in, and that's the kind of player that you want to see, at least to go out, head held high, having given pretty much whatever he possibly could have, and having an opportunity to go 10-2 and back to another New Year's Six bowl.
It's when you look at the entire landscape. Has anybody played two of the top four teams in the college football playoff rankings? I don't think. I think Penn State's the only one, right? Maybe. Because Ole Miss has played Alabama and Georgia. But,
Right.
Is there anybody else?
No, but Notre Dame is not. Notre Dame played one, right? Because they didn't play Michigan this year.
Right.
No, when James Franklin says we've lost the number 1 and number 3 teams in the country, he's not wrong about that. There's that is absolutely certifiable. As that's factual. So this is 10-2 to losing to those two teams can feel Groundhog Day-ish.
Sure. Yep.
But it's and I think that is where it comes down. Is that another back to back? If you go 20-4 regular season over the last 2 years and 20-0 and 0-4, it still feels like, as you asked before, you're not getting any closer to those two teams, and I felt that feels like that's what this season was supposed to be about, and coming up short both ways. While then again 10-2, and having just the unfortunate luck of Ohio State and Michigan being de facto on your schedule this year, and also having the teams that they do, and you putting everything into it and just not getting there, that's frustration all around. I'm sure in Lash, the frustration is probably an order of magnitude higher than it was in Beer Stadium.
Right. No question. Next year, it's a 1-8 team. Next year includes Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA. And contrary to popular belief, just so people know, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, and Caleb Williams will be in the NFL. So all three have to replace their quarterbacks next year.
Right. There's
no Michigan until 2026. The playoff expands to 12. Is that going to give everybody, or can it give a better gauge on where the program is with those factors in play?
Yeah, it absolutely should, and they're going to go into I think they'll go into next season, assuming that the arc continues upward now after this year, right? Assuming they do finish 10-2, and nothing else happens after this to change that narrative.
That's right.
But going into next year, coming into this year, you're saying you've got to beat one of those two teams. Going into next year, I think you believe you have to be in that 12-team playoff in the first year. Having not made it through as close as you've come several times, I think Penn State has to feel like that the 12-team playoff is an absolute kind of almost a baseline for next year. It has to be an absolute goal to get in there, and that would be a mile marker for the program next season. Absolutely.
Yeah, I know I jumped way ahead on that. I just took the clock and kicked it ahead 12 months for you. So.
You're not the only one doing that, I'm sure.
All right. Well, and I'll ask one more, Mark. I mean, obviously there'll be a timing as to when a new offensive coordinator is named. It's going to be sometime, you would guess, between December 4th and December 20th. And the reason is the 4th is the Monday after the championship games, and the 20th is National Letter of Intent Day. So it's going to be somewhere in there. How interested are you going to be by the perceived style of this offensive coordinator? Because you do have quarterbacks that do bring certain things to the table that are different.
I think that's got to be one of the very biggest issues for an offensive coordinator coming in. Maybe not so much even the style that they've run, but how are they able to tailor what they do to specifically Drew Aller, secondarily Bo Pribula, and then the offense in general. It always felt like James Franklin that the 16 and 17 offense with that particular talent and that coordinator was what James generally the style they wanted to run. Not that he's not adaptable, that he's committed entirely to running like the RPO kind of thing. But that's just generally the style that he would like to go. He likes running quarterbacks. And they don't necessarily have that right now, at least in Drew, to run that particular style. Not that Drew can't run, but that style doesn't – I don't think that style suits his strengths fully. So that the style of the next coordinator, while they could have run whatever, air raid, anything like that, if they bring elements of that to Drew and fit it to him, that to me is the most important thing, is being able to is being adaptable while having something that you can install quickly, that Drew can install quickly, and then get going. I don't think you want to get into a situation where it was like Sean having to do it, going through a new offense every 18 months, kind of thing, which is essentially what Sean Clifford did. I don't think you want to be in that with Drew. He needs the next 2 years in something very specific.
Mark, always a pleasure.
If he gets to the next 2 years.
Right. No, I know what you mean. Mark, it's always a pleasure, Mark. Thanks so much for the time, the analysis, and everything. Appreciate you.
Yeah, talk to you too. Thanks, Steve.
Let's bring in the outstanding Frank Bodani. Frank, always a pleasure, my friend. Great to have you back.
Hey, good afternoon, Steve. Hope you're doing well midweek here.
I'm doing very well. How about you?
It's a little busy time here. There's a few things going on with Penn State football. Just a couple here. We head toward Thanksgiving,
So what have been your thoughts about how the last 72 hours plus and how it's played out here and what the future can look like? So we'll start with how it's played out to this point.
Well, I think the timing of Mike Yurcich's firing and that announcement and such, I think maybe caught some people a little by surprise, just the timing of it, but not the occurrence of it. I think that seemed to be trending toward a move. And hey, the offense did not look, at least from the outside, the way fans, media types and such expected, did not do that. So what's going to change? Something's got to change. And I think it's interesting that now we have, at least officially, unofficially, we have a coordinator search going on as the season's going on. So it's a lot because there's also a game Saturday, right. Of course, that, you can't, you're not forgetting about. But I think Penn State fans are just more, they know that Penn State plays Rutgers on Saturday, but I think it's more about, well, where do we go from here? Because what they saw on offense is not what they wanted, what they expected, and not enough to beat the two teams they really cared about, fair or not. So it seems like the focus is a little more on that than it is on the Rutgers Scarlet Knights going on.
All right. So when you look at the state of that offense, quarterback, running backs, offensive line, tight ends, wide receivers, How do you look at each grouping to this point, based just on what you've either seen on TV or when you've physically been there to watch it? What is your general impression of each of those areas?
Well, running backs, I just think there's more to get from them. And I wonder about being utilized, how they could be utilized, because Nick Singleton and Katron Allen both at least appear to be have vast talents among them. I mean, we saw Nick Singleton run away from people, very explosive last year. You've seen Katron Allen with his vision, with his power, and it just seemed like there's more to get there. So how do you get Nick Singleton in space? How do you make those great athletic gifts real weapons? It just seemed like they were not able to do that. So give them all the credit for how hard those two kids are trying, but I think it's the usage there. I think there's more to gain. I really thought they'd both be more involved in the pass game this year, and getting somehow Nick in space and on the edge. The tight ends, I mean, really productive. I guess I'm always someone that thinks, hey, you got 6'5" guys who can really catch the ball. Why are you not throwing it to them even more? I think they really got to try to find that group more the last couple games of the season, because I think they're so good at what they can do, especially catching. Blocking, I think it's hard to replace Brenton Strange.
Yes.
I think that's a reality.
Agreed.
I think he did a tremendous job, and I think he maybe overexceeded his expectations as a blocker last year, but I think they missed him this year. But pass catching wise, the tight ends to me, everything, the red zone, everything you would want. I mean, wide receivers, that's the biggest question on the entire team, Steve, to me. That's the biggest fault of the entire team. Do they have a number one guy? I mean, I don't know. Keandre Lambert-Smith, great athletic ability. I don't know if he's quite what the number ones were in the past, and they don't have the guys behind him, and that's, to me, their biggest priority going forward next season. Development, transfer portal, whatever you want to say. To me, that's number one on the team. Offensive line, I think, has done well enough. Have they dominated the way some people thought maybe in the run game at times? No. But overall, I mean, the guy, Caden Wallace, has stepped up. I mean, I think we can see that. I think they've held their own. I think they've held their own. And Drew Aller is the quarterbacks. Drew is number-wise. I think he's, a tremendously coachable kid, has done everything they seemingly have asked. Two biggest games, I think he needs more help. And I wonder what it's going to look like in the pass plays coming up Saturday, for example. Are we going to see a real difference in the routes, the schemes, trying to make what James said, make it easier for Drew earlier in the games with easier passes? So I'll be fascinated to see how that looks any differently.
Where do you think Drew Aller is maybe better than he was when he started the season? We'll keep it on that vein, because everybody will take, okay, he's not doing this, and this. Where do you think he's better right now?
Well, I think he's come into terms with the idea of running with the football. And making that decision to do it. I didn't know if that would be a part of his game. I didn't know if it would need to be a part of his game. But he is 6'4", 6'5". I mean, he kind of looks like Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, he's a load to bring down, and I think there's things to gain from that, right?
Right.
So, I mean, to me, that's and him maybe dealing. Okay, so I didn't know if he'd have to deal with a lot of adversity from the position. So I think we've seen him do that. The way he's entertained the media, the questions, some of the tough times on the team, I think he's handled that. I think he's handled that pretty well.
Yeah. Okay, so defensively, when you look at this team defensively, what are the elements that you like about it that puts the team in a position to win consistently?
Well, I mean, speed, depth. To me, you have arguably the most talent of any Penn State defense, just to start with, under James Franklin. You know, we went through this the beginning of the year. I mean, there's 3-4 All-American candidates on that team, on that defense, and the speed that they have, the depth that they have, and the guy calling the plays and coaching them up. I mean, is there one better in the country than Manny Diaz? I think he's as good as they get.
Yep.
So that combination, I mean, and it's all layers, right? I mean, I think another Penn State defenses has been so good at linebacker, so good on the line. I think, you know, it's that the talent and everything I talked about is spread out on 3 layers better than it's ever been.
Right. Okay, so we talked about, you know, moving forward from here. The choice of an offensive coordinator, how interested are you going to be in the style of coordinator it is, based on the fact that you do have 2 quarterbacks here that do have nuanced differences, but some differences as to how they play the game?
Absolutely, and I think James made it a point on Monday to talk about how they're going to be involved. I mean, Drew Aller is your number 1 guy, right? 5-star quarterback. He has all the NFL, at least it looks like all the NFL abilities and tangibles. And to me, you search for this type of guy, to me. You finally got this type of guy. So I think you have to make a choice on somebody that's got to be able to come in and coach that type of guy. You know what, coaches in this day and age, players, what is the loyalty really anywhere? I mean, they can go somewhere and they can change the next month, the next year. So you got to get to me, you have to be able to, if you have a treasure there, some gold, you got to be able to develop it and mine it like now. Mm-hmm. So to me, I think somebody has to be able to develop a pro-style quarterback. It's going to be a rough choice to me if all of a sudden the pick is somebody that hasn't been able to prove that in their career, right? Somebody that's completely, you know, maybe just all spread and look at what quarterbacks they've worked with. I mean, I think you need someone have been able to develop a guy like Drew Aller, because, you know, that's the kind of guy that, to me, that's the kind of guy that can win you a championship. So I am. I mean, nothing against anybody else that's on that roster. Love Bo Prabula and the other guys they got coming in and Jackson, but I think you have to be able to develop a big pro-style quarterback.
All right, so now let's get to this part. There will be those who are vocal about how they feel about a coaching staff when things don't go right on the field in a particular weekend. And normally that call is to fire everybody. Head coach, coordinators, janitor, everybody. Okay. All right. And I've done research on this. And what I've found is, and I want to know what you think about this. You look at some of the big name programs. USC's been searching. Texas has been searching. Right? I mean, Miami's been searching. To a point, Florida State's been searching. They've all been trying to search, and Texas A&M's been searching. Been running through people. Auburn's been searching. Right? When you look at James Franklin, right, and the progress that's at least been made to get to this point, based on where he took over, what should the perspective be, in your opinion, about that and what I just talked about?
Well, there's 2 different ways of, you know, you almost have to sit somebody down and say that, okay, there's 2 different ways of looking at this. I understand the fan, your way. You have a certain expectation based on previous, what they've done and what you think they should do. And then you have the reality of the rest of the college football world. And, you know, LeVar Arrington had a nice little video piece today, and trying to put things in perspective. 10-2 and beating, you know, he had not lost to anyone else on their schedule other than Ohio State and Michigan. So that's the flip side. That kind of consistency is pretty much unbelievable, right? Because James gets looked over and glassy-eyed when he talks about consistency. But, I mean, to beat everybody else every week, I think it is harder to do, obviously, than what people realize, right? I mean, that's an accomplishment. And that's pretty much, I mean, that's been the case. That's not just this year. I mean, that's been the case for several years here. So can they look at the bigger picture? I think it's simply that. Can they look at the bigger picture? Do they care about the bigger picture? The bigger picture meaning what his overall success has been in rebuilding, not just winning, but in rebuilding Penn State.
Right.
And in this day and age when everything is so much more volatile with your coaching staff and your players. And I see here, Steve, here's the other part that I think is hard for people to understand is the financial NIL part of it. And I think it's hard for all of us to understand because I don't think the figures are, they're not laid out there for you as to what is coming and what goes and what you need. But we know Penn State was behind in that.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily James Franklin's fault. So you do need money nowadays to be able to put together talent on a team. And that's something I think people still do not want to grasp. And I think Penn State is working toward that. And I think with the success that James has had, I mean, that plays into this. But if you don't, but then at the end, I think people just want a win or two over those teams.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Of course, absolutely.
I think that's what it really comes down to. If they would have,
absolutely,
how would the narrative be for fans if they won one of those games this year and that's
no
it?
question.
Nothing else has changed in the last 2 years.
You are right. Yep.
How much different would you think it'd be?
Yeah, I mean, it would be dramatically different. Right, and we'd be having a different conversation right now, even with a split.
Yes, one game. I mean, and maybe he's, and I'm not there. I don't know what the disconnect may be between James Franklin and the staff and Mike Yursich and the plan being created and the plan being executed. But if that could be one of the main things holding them back in those two games for whatever reasons, and you're going to fix it, you fix it now, try to. And if they come out next year with whoever they have leading and then they win one of those games and take care of their business, going to be a different scenario. I mean, it's a tough world we live in when it comes to judging, isn't it?
No, it's very tough, without question. And the dynamics change dramatically next year, Frank, because next year means that Washington, Oregon, USC, and UCLA are in. It's a 1 through 18. The top two get in, but even if you're not in the top two, you could be 3 or 4 because the college football playoff expands to 12. What can that do pro and con to the perception of any coach? Huh?
Yeah, it's harder and easier, right? Because, I mean, now Penn State has an easier chance of qualifying, but their schedule's a little tougher. I mean,
yes,
in some ways.
Yep.
But here's the thing. I think it's not going to be as tough of a change for them as others, right? Because they are one of the few who already had to play Ohio State and Michigan every year, right? Yes. They already know what it's like to do that. So now suddenly they're going to have to play those Pac-12 teams, but they're not going to have to at least play Ohio State and Michigan every year the same year. So I don't think it gets dramatically tougher for them as it does for others because they've already known that.
Right.
Right? So I think when this all shakes out, I think it's going to be better for Penn State because I think simply the fact they've proven that they can make an expanded playoff. They've proven that since 2016.
Right.
They could have done it several times. And I don't think even with the Pac-12 teams coming in that's going to change.
Right. Frank, always a pleasure. Great perspective as always. Look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. All the best till then. enjoy it.